Everyone treats how much house can I afford as a question about their salary. It stopped being one. You type your income into the calculator. It hands back a smaller house than that income was supposed to buy. And everyone walks away from that screen assuming the problem is them. It isn't. The house you can afford is set by three numbers: your income, your down payment, and the rate on the day you sign. Only one of them is actually yours. So this goes by income, bottom to top, and two things flip on the way up. Somewhere in the middle, there's an income where the house stops being about your income at all. And at the very top, the highest earners stop trying to afford the house at all. Watch for both. Start at the bottom. $30,000 a year. Take home, that's around $2,000 a month. Here's the rule the whole climb runs on, so learn it once. A bank wants your housing payment under 28% of what you make. For $30,000, that's about $700 a month. And $700 a month, everything in, loan, taxes, insurance, carries a house worth around $105,000 at a rate near 6.5%, where it sits in the middle of 2026. There's the shortcut for the entire episode. Run the 28% against today's rate and it collapses to one line. The house you can afford is about 3.5 times your income. If you have 20% to put down, 3.5 times, hold on to it. Now, go find a $105,000 house. In most of the country, that number doesn't point at a home. It points at a trailer, a gut job, or a listing that sold before you called. So at $30,000, you rent. And that same $700 a month rents you a room or a studio in a cheap metro. And every dollar of it disappears. You're paying a mortgage, just not on anything that will ever be yours. And here's a trap that keeps the door shut. To buy, you need a down payment. But rent takes the exact money the down payment would come from. And rent climbs every year with the same market you're locked out of. The thing you're chasing gets faster every year you chase it. At the bottom, you don't fail to buy a house. You were never handed the key. $50,000. Now the rule gives you about $1,150 a month and 3.5 times says you can carry a home around $175,000. And a $175,000 house is real. It exists. It's just not where your job is, because the places with houses that cheap are the places with paychecks to match. Small towns, shrinking counties, an hour past the last exit with an employer on it. The cheap house and the good job sit at opposite ends of the same map. Say you buy the affordable house anyway and keep the city job. Now you're driving 90 minutes each way. That's gas. That's a car aging out twice as fast. That's 3 hours of your day gone. A second rent paid in fuel and time instead of dollars. The house was cheaper. The life around it wasn't. And the promise you make yourself to close the gap either that this one's temporary, the real house comes later, usually doesn't hold. The cheap market house barely grows in value because what makes a house appreciate is the demand around it, and you bought where the demand left. So the equity that was supposed to fund the move up never shows up. You didn't buy a starter home. You bought a holding pattern with a mortgage. So $50,000 doesn't buy you a house. It buys you a choice, the affordable home or the affordable life. Almost never both at once. $75,000 a year. And this is right about what the typical American household earns, around $80,000 in the middle of 2026. 3.5 times gets you to about $260,000 of house. And for the first time on this ladder, that number buys something you'd actually live in. A condo, an older place, a smaller house further out. But each one carries a quiet tax. The condo has an HOA, $300 or $400 a month that builds you nothing. It eats straight into your 28%, and so your $260 of buying power is really closer to $210 of house, plus a bill for someone else's rules. The place further out saves you money by the mile and charges it back in the commute. The older house is cheap because the roof, the furnace, and the wiring are all somebody's future problem. That somebody is now you. And notice where $260 lands. The typical home in America sells for right around $400,000 today. So a median income, what the middle household actually earns, buys a house firmly below the middle of the market. And the market knows this rung is stuck here, so it built a product for it. The endlessly stretched loan. Lower the down payment, drag the term out, tuck the taxes into escrow so the monthly number looks survivable. And suddenly the $260 house pencils out. It just quietly costs you an extra decade of payments and a pile of interest to make a house you can't quite afford look like a house you can. This is the rung where the starter home quietly died. It used to be the first step before the real one. At 75,000, the starter home isn't the first step anymore. It's a whole staircase. $100,000, six figures. For an entire generation, this was the number. Cross it and you'd made it. Run the ladder. 3.5 times 100,000 lands at about $350,000 of house. Now, hold that against that same 400,000 median, the house half the country already lives in. Six figures gets you to 350. You clear the doorway. You do not clear the middle. Sit with that. The income that used to mean I arrived now means I'm almost at the average house. Not the nice one. The average one, the house that is, by definition, unremarkable. And this is where a specific kind of quiet frustration lives. You make six figures and you feel broke, and the assumption is that you're bad with money. Usually, you're not. Nothing about the salary shrank. The finish line moved. The raise to 100,000 got chased, and while it was being chased, the median house drifted $50,000 further off. That's the cruelest part of this rung. It's the one where the whole instruction manual got followed. The degree, the six-figure job, the clean credit, the low debt, everything they said to do, and the reward for finishing it is a house that's slightly worse than average. The plan worked. The plan just isn't enough anymore, and nobody updated the plan. Six figures used to be the finish line. Now it's the number that gets you almost in. 150,000 a year. Now the math finally clears the median. 3.5 times gets you past $500,000. Over that 400,000 middle, into the house people actually picture when they picture a house. The yard, the garage, the door that's yours. So the normal house now starts at $150,000 income, nearly double that 80,000 median household. But here's what this ladder has been hiding, and it's the reason the middle is where it pays off. Take two people. Both earn $100,000. One just bought a $500,000 house. The other can't get through the door. Same income, same job title even, completely different lives. The difference was never the salary. It was three things the salary can't see. One, the down payment. 20% of a $400,000 house is $80,000 in cash, and almost nobody saves that. They're handed it. Two, the rate. Someone who locked in at 3% a few years ago pays one payment. Someone buying that same house today at 6.5 pays about 50% more every month. Same house, 50% more, decided entirely by the year they signed. And three, whether they bought before the run-up or after. So the house isn't bought with your salary. It's bought with your salary plus someone's down payment plus the year you happen to be born. Income is one lever out of three, and the other two are mostly luck and inheritance, wearing the costume of a smart decision. At $250,000 a year, the whole question changes shape. The house stops being the constraint. Below here, the mortgage picked the neighborhood. You found the payment you could carry, and it told you where you were allowed to live. At $250,000, that flips. You pick the neighborhood, and the payment follows. The math still works out to something like $875,000 of house, but the number on the listing stopped being a wall. It became a choice. And what that actually buys isn't square footage. It's a zip code, which, in this country, quietly means the schools, the safety, the 30-year outcome for the kids who grow up there. That's the real product at this rung. Not more house. A better set of odds for the people inside it, sold the only way it's sold, through the address, which is the quiet engine of how all of this passes down. The 250 household buys into the good district. Their kid gets the schools, the classmates, the assumption that college is just what happens next. And 30 years later, that kid starts the same ladder 3 rungs up. The address didn't just buy a house, it bought the next generation starting line. At $250,000, you stop asking how much house you can afford and start asking which house you want. That question, quietly, is the whole prize. But there's one rung left, and at the top, even that question disappears. $500,000 a year. On paper, 3.5 times says a $1.75 million house, easily. But watch what actually happens up here, because it's the reverse of everything below. At the top, people stop stretching for the house. The family earning $50,000 pours every dollar it can find into the down payment and prays the appraisal comes back. The household making $500,000 often pays cash or borrows against investments it never has to sell, and the house lands as one modest line on a balance sheet full of bigger ones. It isn't the stretch, it's the collateral. That's the same move wealth uses everywhere. Never sell the thing that's growing, borrow against it instead. Down the ladder, the home is the entire financial life. Up here, it's a rounding error with a roof, and that gap compounds in a way the monthly payment hides. The 50 grand family, if it ever gets in, owns one asset, the house, and every dollar it has is trapped inside the walls. The $500,000 household owns the house and the portfolio it borrowed against, and both of them grow at the same time. Same word, homeowner. Two completely different machines running underneath it. So the question inverts one last time. Everyone below is asking, how much house can I afford? How far can I stretch? The person at 500,000 asked the opposite. How little of my money does this house need to be? And that's the tell for the whole climb. You stretch to the edge of what you can afford only when the house is the biggest thing you own. Real money treats the house as the small part. The flex was never the size of the house. It was how little of you the house required. So here's the whole ladder in two truths. First, the 28% rule this entire climb ran on is already broken for the middle. Households buying at today's prices and rates in mid-2026 spend closer to 35, even 40% of their income just to get in the door. The rule didn't change. The market walked away from it. So stop grading yourself against a line the market abandoned years ago. Second, the lever was never the price. It was the payment. A price once you overpay it is permanent. A rate can sometimes be refinanced later, and if rates fall and you still qualify, and you can eat the closing costs. Which is why the people who get in early aren't buying a bigger salary. They're closing one gap. A smaller first place, a roommate covering part of the note, a low down payment loan, family cash that shows up out of nowhere. None of it glamorous, all of it faster than waiting for a six-figure salary to save $80,000 while rent eats the difference. Because you were never priced out of a house, you were priced out of a rate and out of a down payment. And unlike your birth year, unlike the whole rigged map of who got in early, those are the two numbers that can still change.